Hello, happy Tuesday. We're going to do the review for last Thursday's mystery grape. It was Torrontes from Argentina, particularly the Salta region in Argentina. So we're northeast of the part of the country, very mountainous. A lot of great guesses. The clues were very much leaning towards a super aromatic grape. And so just about every aromatic grape you can imagine was submitted as a guess. You know, we got Viognier, Muscat, Riesling, Albarino, Gewürztraminer. So a lot of really good ones there. And very, very logical and reasonable to get to those guesses. So if you were in a blind tasting exam and you had like the mixed bag flight, which could be anything from anywhere, and you got a Torrontes and your notes lend you towards going to, a Viognier or a Gewürztraminer, you would get a lot of marks. So even if you didn't nail the wine, you still would have done really well. So it's definitely not one to stress over. Another area that the Torrontes tends to pop up on is often in the country flight. And so you would have most definitely a Malbec there. That third wine, along with the Torrontes and the Malbec, could be quite a bit. I mean, there's great Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, Cabernet, Bonarda. So that would be a little tougher, but when you're doing these flights, you always kind of want to take each wine individually. So let's look individually at what's in the glass with the Torrontes and how that could possibly steer you towards the grape. And in particular, when you think about regions, the Salta region, which is really well known. They grow Torrontes throughout the country. Mendoza has quite a bit, but this area is very special for it, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So the clues. Clue 1 was Meyer lemon. Very deliberately I chose this. As an American, I'm very familiar with it because it's one that we grow quite a bit in California. It's more of a sweeter lemon. It's a really good lemon to make lemonade with. So very ripe lemon is what I was going for versus more tart lemon. Peaches. Citrus. A lot more citrus, building on the lemon. So here, again, also ripe citrus. Grapefruit. Navel oranges. Tangerine. I want to try to convey here that this is a grape that kind of grows in warmth versus more tartar citrus that you would see from a cooler climate. And then to keep building on that, clue number 4 was papaya, a tropical fruit. You can also get maybe mango even. Lychee also can pop up a bit. I associate lychee more with Gewürz, but sometimes in a lot of notes for Torrontes, you'll see lychee come up. But also with the papaya, I noted there was a couple clues there because there was a floral component there. In this case, there was orchid on there. So I wanted to start thinking about flowers. And then to build on that, clue 5, jasmine. Jasmine's a very, very distinctive one. So floral jasmine. And then to keep hitting that home, clue 6 was also floral. It was soap that were shaved in flowers on that. Because floral, you want to think floral with Torrontes. Jasmine, of course, but honeysuckle, elderflower could also pop up. Rose, geranium, lots and lots of floral. But I really like doing the floral soap note because for me, this is one of my tells on this. I used to, in my teenage years, I used to work at the mall, one of those little survey girls, would you like to take a survey? I don't know if they had it in other countries in there, but the U.S., that was a thing, especially in the 90s and early 2000s. And any time I walked past Bath and Body Works, smelling all the soap and kind of the floral element of it, that just really, really resonated to me when I started studying wine and, Torrontes. It's just like, it smells, there's a little bit of that chemical aspect of it, obviously because of soap, but just that intense perfume. How does this come about in Torrontes? How does this come about in any kind of aromatic grape? This intensity of it. Well, terpenes is the compound on it. And Torrontes is, along with Muscat, is one of the most aromatic, highest levels of terpene. Muscat and Torrontes, they've done some studies on it with seeing the levels. And there is 4 times the amount of terpenes in Torrontes and Muscat than there is in Gewürztraminer. And Gewürz, we don't know, is really aromatic. But 4 times more in Torrontes. 6 times more terpenes in Torrontes than in Riesling and Viognier. And 30 times more terpenes than in the semi-aromatic grapes, more neutral ones like Chardonnay and Pinot Gris. So think about these notes here with the terpenes because they just literally jump out of the glass. Now the region that this Torrontes grows from, particularly Salta, definitely plays a role in this. So when we think about the area in Salta, we think about the really, really high elevations on that and how that comes to play. And let me get to the structure notes here and we'll go back to that. So the structure notes on that, pale lemon, possibly can even have a hint of green. You don't want to note that on your exam if you're doing like a WSET exam because you want to just have pale lemon. You don't want to add anything else to it. But just mentally and on your scratch paper, if you notice a little hint of green, that's worth noting. Often when you see a little bit of green in a wine, it could indicate early harvest, could indicate high yields as well. Pronounced intensity, that definitely emphasizing. Dry, it's going to be dry. It's going to smell so intense and floral and sweet that you're expecting sugar, but no, it's going to be dry. So big flag there. Medium acidity. This is another one that's really, really big. You know, if you were thinking towards Riesling or, you know, even Muscat even can be a little higher with that. You think of like Muscat in Alsace on it. But definitely Riesling's going to be higher acidity. Albarino is going to be higher acidity on it. So the only medium acidity, that's definitely, your mouth is not going to be watering. There'll still be enough to have some freshness to it, but not mouth watering. Medium to medium plus body. So we've got a little heft there. There are some, I think Guildsom on their Torrontes page, they even talk about it going up to full body on it. I haven't came across it where it feels full body, but there's definitely a ripeness there that does add body on it. Medium to high alcohol, and that's where your bigger body's going to come. Getting ripe, goes over 14%, it's in the high alcohol range on there. So where is this ripeness coming from? Think of the location of where Argentina is, but particularly going north, going closer to the equator. Salta, the the latitude of that, 24.7 degrees south of that. So that, if you think about the distance from the equator, that's pretty similar. If we flipped over to the northern hemisphere, Key Largo, Florida, on that, Taiwan, you go to the Arabian Peninsula, you know, Qatar, Oman, on there. That is low latitude. That is close to the equator. That's going to have some warmth to it. It's also going to have more light intensity on there because you think of the shape of the globe, shape of the earth, closer to the equator, it's more light intensity there. Then you add the altitude, the elevation. In this area, about 1,500 meters up to 3,000 meters on there. So you're going up, so you are getting some cooling influence to deal with that warmth. That is helpful because you know the further higher up you go, the temperature drops on there. However, higher up you go, thinner the atmosphere, the more intensity of light, more UV. That's going to contribute to the ripeness as well. Another positive again with the cooling influence, high altitude has wider diurnals. So they can go from like 30 degrees Celsius in the day and drop all the way down to 10 degrees Celsius at night. That's a big swing. And so that's going to help preserve some of that precious acidity. And it keeps it from going as low as some other varieties like Viognier. Viognier can go really low, especially when you think of, you know, in the Languedoc area and parts of the Rhone, very warm there. They'll drop below medium and go down to low. That altitude helps as a little bit of a saving grace there. Other factors that impact it, it's not very fertile soils in these areas here. Up in you know, there's some alluvial soils, very rocky soils. That's going to help restrain yields, which is good, and that will build intensity on this. When you think Torrontes, you think intensity. It's a very dry area on it. Doesn't get a lot of rain. Irrigation is allowed with that, but naturally not a super wet area. So drier area, a little bit of desiccation, you could say, that builds intensity on it. Then there is the Zonda wind that can impact it through different parts of the year. The impacts in the springtime, you know, can reduce yields on there. But then later during the growing season, you know, it's a warm, dry wind. That warmth is going to give you more of the ripeness, as is the dry, a little bit more of the concentration, more of the intensity. Great with reducing disease pressure, but it's going to have an impact on the grape. It can also thicken the skins of Torrontes. And so another note that is very common with Torrontes is a little bit of a bitterness that can hit you, especially on the finish. Those thicker skins will contribute to that bitterness on it. The other thing you want to think about too, when we were talking about with how close it is to the equator and the high elevation, with that UV intensity, you always want to be mindful of the risk of sunburn on grapes. You want to get the grapes exposed to get a little bit of ripeness, but too much exposure, especially with that high UV, just like us with our skins, it can get burned. And in the case with wine, with the grapes, sunburnt grapes zap a lot of the flavor, but also contribute bitterness. And so that's another thing to be mindful for. For producers that are making better quality Torrontes, they're spending time in the vineyard with canopy management to make sure they have the shading. The pergola vine training is also favored for that reason, to give it some natural shading and that sunburn protection. So you add all these together and you can see all these things that are building that intensity and that concentration with all those terpenes that are natural to the grape of Torrontes that is accentuated by the environment that it is grown in. And then you can see where some of the things like potentially like the bitterness could come in, and like our little floral soap note. Soap is bitter. I mean, I'm old enough to kind of remember where parents still threatened to, wash your mouth out with soap. They never really did it because by that point people were thinking, oh, that's child abuse. But soap can be bitter. And I don't recommend anybody like trying soap just to get an idea of better blind tasting with that, because I just don't think it's going to be helpful. But when you smell something very perfumed and aromatic like soap, think about what's left in your mouth. Even though you're not tasting it, you're just smelling it. When you're with that intensity on there, there's almost like a residue that you feel in your mouth, and that subtle bitterness. Think about that the next time you're trying a Torrontes, and that can kind of help convey some of those notes, because that is going to separate it from some of your other varieties on there. Like Riesling. Riesling is very rarely bitter. It's going to have a higher acidity as well. Gewürztraminer could have a little bitterness, as can Viognier. So you're still keeping those in line, but they're not going to be quite as intense, especially in the floral aspect of it, as Torrontes. I kind of picture Torrontes, if I have Torrontes here, Muscat Blanc, that is going to be just as intense, with aromatics. Going to have some florals. Also going to have a little bit more grape note that you don't get. That smells like a grape on it. Muscat is that grape that smells like a grape. Torrontes doesn't quite have that on it. So that's the tips for today. I'm going to go work on today's mystery grape of the geeky variety and get that out to you. Have a good one.